Today I am going to be demonstrating this oil painting of a flamingo. Hi, I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art. There's no bees this time. It's weird, I know. So for this painting, I am working on a Fredrix Pro Series oil-primed Belgian linen canvas. I went with this one because it is so smooth. Whenever I'm gonna do a painting that is all oil, I love using the oil-primed linen canvases. I sound like a commercial. This is not a commercial or a sponsored video. I just want you guys to know what I like. But I like these canvases because the paint just glides across them. You can get such tiny details so much easier than on some other rougher canvases. Definitely my favorite to work on when doing all oil. For the black and white portions of this painting, I have used Weber's Permalba oil paint, and then for the rest of this, I have used Winsor Newton. The reference photo for this is my own. For those of you who are supporters over on Patreon, this was one of your photos this month. It'll be really interesting to see everybody's different take on this because this is not what that photo looked like. If you are supporters over on Patreon, the 1-hour version of this tutorial is available for you now, complete with voiceover, so make sure to head over and check that out. Starting off, I am going to loosely block in where I want my lights and darks for my background. I don't really need to worry about my brush strokes here. With oils, it dries so slow that when I come on top with the mop brush, that will get rid of all of those brush strokes. I am mixing liquid in with this. Liquid is a fast drying medium, so that is going to allow everything that I paint today to be dry by the next day so I can work on my next layer. My goal for this first day is just to cover the entire canvas with oil paint. I'm using Weber Permalba Black and Weber's Permalba White, just those two colors, for this entire background. For blocking in the colors, I've taken my colored photograph and made it black and white so that I could judge better where my values are, how dark the feathers need to be or how light they need to be. I'm just loosely putting them where they go. If I have a feather that's a little bit off, a details in any given area is a little bit off, it's really not that big of a deal here. I need to make sure that the location of the beak and the eye and the head, that needs to be exact. But as far as feathers, they rustle and move in the wind anyway. No one's going to know the difference if one's a little bit off, so I'm not stressing out about making sure everything's perfect here. As I work, so that I don't have to keep cleaning my brushes, I am keeping a separate set of brushes that I'm using just for the white and a separate set that I'm using for the grays and the blacks. That makes it much, much easier on me to switch back and forth between the two colors. While I don't need everything to be perfect detail-wise right now, I still want to make sure that if I'm going to have sketchy lines like I've got on the feathers here, that they are going in the right direction. Blending everything out, you can see I've switched to a smaller mop brush for these smaller areas. I'm also blending a lot of this with a stiff round brush. I am going to hype up my contrast just a bit from what my photo is. That photo was not taken in the best light, so it's a little bit on the boring side, so I do want to punch that contrast up a bit. Blocking in the head, I've got my base fading from the darker gray up to the lighter gray, and now I'm coming back through and starting to build up some of the texture. This is going to take several layers to get the texture where I want it on the head feathers. This is very much like painting fur. This more so than painting individual feathers. I'm focusing on clumps and the direction that this goes in, but not individual little strands as much. Onto the eye and the beak, just blocking everything in again. I do need to make sure that the shape of the beak is correct. That is important. As I block in my lights and darks, I just make a couple of brush strokes with that stiff round brush to soften the edges out, but I don't want to overblend. Don't keep blending and blending to where you end up with no definition anymore. That's a problem that a lot of artists have when working in oils. They want to overblend, and you lose all of your detail. You lose your brights and your darker colors, so definitely watch out for that. A little bit more detail on the head here while this is still wet. Once I get this in, I'm going to let it dry overnight. Now, onto the second day, everything is dry to the touch, and I'm just going over what I did before. I'm starting to clean up my edges, adding detail, brightening up where the whites need to be, because when I blended initially on the first day, a lot of those whites end up blending in too much with my grays. So here, I start to better define that and let them pop out at you a bit more, be a lot brighter. Not all of them, I do want some of them to stay soft, but this gives me a bit more control because that first layer is already dry and I'm no longer fighting the white of the canvas. I've got all of the feathers blocked in so I can pretty much see where everything goes. I got all the hard stuff done on the first day. That to me is always the hardest part, figuring out which feather is which ones need to be light, which ones need to be dark, where the blending needs to be. The rest of this, it's a bit easier. I think it is anyway. So you can see I'm using my liner brush a lot for this. I'm blocking in a lot of, or cleaning up the edges, really making everything a lot sharper than it was. And I'm blending out with that smaller mop brush on the little areas, and some of the areas I'm also blending with that stiff round brush, the smaller one of that as well. And for the second day, I don't need to cover the entire canvas with wet paint. I'm just putting it where it needs to go. Don't feel like you have to repaint over everything. If it doesn't need it, then you don't need to repaint that area. Getting those sketchy lines in for those feathers there, making sure that those are going in the right direction for the feather. Doing the same thing on the beak this day as I did the previous day. I'm just cleaning everything up a bit more, adding some more detail and texture into the feathers on the head. Now that is really rough. When I do go back in with color, that's going to soften it up, so I need to intentionally make that look a little bit rougher than it needs to be. The feathers on the head, I mean. So here, again, it's just like before, blocking in my lights and my darks. I'm coming through with that liner brush, creating some of those sketchy lines. I let that dry overnight, and now I am on to the third day of painting. On the third day, this is not taking very much time. I didn't really need to spend a whole lot of time on anything here. I'm mainly just cleaning up those edges, just those little details to sharpen everything up. And I'm not trying to repaint what's there. I'm working with what's already there. Now I want to define the detailing in the beak a little bit more too. So I let that dry. Now I can start glazing my color. I will have the colors listed below in the video description that I used, but if you don't have these same colors, don't worry about it. It's really the values that matter more here. Make sure your lights are light enough, your darks are dark enough. So as I'm blocking these in, I'm still worrying about my values. And this first layer, every time I glaze color like this, the first day always makes it look worse than the previous day. It will get better. I'm just loosely blocking in where everything is going to go. It's going to be a little bit on the muddy side. The next day, I'm going to clean things up, and I will start to get more of that glow that oil paint is known for from doing the additional layers. But this first layer, it's just loosely blocking in where my color is going to go. I'm using my Viva paper towel, and a normal paper towel, by the way, will not work. It needs to be Viva because it is very cloth-like. You can also use an old t-shirt, but I'm using that Viva paper towel. You'll see me wipe areas off quite a bit. Areas that I went too dark, I'm able to clean up, brighten back up, just one feather at a time by wrapping that paper towel around my finger. You can also use a Q-tip for smaller areas. You can see I wiped a little bit more up. What I'm doing here is just tinting the color. I'm not trying to completely cover what was underneath. I just want to adjust that color. Getting some of these highlights. I'm using my zinc white for a lot of the highlights that I'm doing here, because if I use the titanium white, it's going to be too opaque and really going to cover the details underneath. So the zinc white allows me to lighten the color without making the color too opaque. I leave the titanium white for areas I want really bright, like around the eye or on the eyeball itself, some of the highlights on the feathers, and a little bit on the beak, but the majority that I'm using here is the zinc white. Coming back through now with some orange. Now, even for me, even though I know this is going to look better the next day, it's still frustrating for me to go through this kind of ugly stage when it looked better the day before. I do this every time I oil paint like this. I do, even when I do an oil over acrylic. With that first day of oil, just doesn't look very good. That's normal. Don't let it frustrate you. This is just one of many layers. So I went ahead and let this dry overnight. Now we are on the last day of painting for this one. I'm starting by using this really deep burgundy color, and now I'm worrying about my values a lot more. And I want to start creating that glow. Right now, everything has this very flat, very boring look. So I'm also going to be using a lot of orange on this day. That orange on top of the peaches and reds that I did before, it just looks beautiful. And you've heard me say this before, if I'm using orange, I'm pretty much always going to use violets or magentas. And the same thing, if I'm using the violets and magentas, I'm always going to use orange. It's not that that has to be done. That's how I like to paint, and I love those colors together. But that's really what I'm doing here, and you can see how beautifully they work together. Orange and magenta just look so nice. So I'm coming on top with my liner brush, that is the synthetic hog hair number 4 liner, and getting some of these the texture from the feathers on the back of the head here. I am using Naples yellow mixed with a little bit of white, and that is the titanium white because I do want that to be a bit more opaque so it really stands out. The Naples yellow is pretty opaque as well. And on this day, I'm just going through and refining detail even more. This is my last day of painting, so now all of those shadows, all of these little teeny tiny details start bringing everything together. I want the beak to stand out more, so I need to make sure that the feathers behind it are a little bit darker. These are the sorts of things that I'm watching for. I continuously take photos, back away from it, look at it upside down, especially on something like this because I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to how the entire design works together. Because I've only colored parts of this, I need to really make sure that it's balancing out. So I've got to keep backing away to make sure that I don't overdo, put too much color or don't have enough. The nice thing here is that because most of what's under that I'm painting right now, most of it is dry, so these little teeny details that I'm doing with the liner brush, they stick really well. I'm not having to worry about them blending too much to where you can't see the detail. I'm also using a lot of the liquid fine detail to blend out a lot of the little details. Normally I like my liquid original, but when I got to the finer details, the little teeny things on the feathers, I did switch to the liquid fine detail. It's just a little bit thinner and it makes it easier to get your paint thin enough that you can get the tiny details. But that is it for this guy. Thanks for watching. Again, if you are supporters over on Patreon, the longer version of this tutorial is available for you now, complete with voiceover, so make sure to head over and check that out. If you're new to my channel, I have new video critiques every Tuesday where I'm critiquing your original paintings or drawings, my own speed paintings, drawings, and tutorials every Wednesday, art Q&A videos every Thursday, and artist vlogs each weekend. So if you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe so you don't miss out on anything, and you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google+. All of those social media sites are linked below in the video description where you can keep up with news, my newest work, and see real-time clips of whatever it is I'm currently working on. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Those of you who've been following me over on Instagram know what this is. I'm not just insane. This is the spy hanger. I'm tempted to put him back in the closet with clothes on him, but if he shows back up on my workbench, it's going to freak me out. So I think I'm just gonna leave him on the workbench permanently. That is where he lives now. And everyone who does not follow me on Instagram right now thinks I am completely insane. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying this actually does have a backstory.